Bay Area listeners, come see Vicious Cycle perform live. We'll be performing or bluff-forming at the Talkies Comedy Show in Oakland on Friday, September 14th. Talkies is the Bay Area's best unconventional, experimental, and multimedia live comedy event. We're super excited. That's the Talkies on September 14th. Find out more info on our Instagram or Facebook, and we'll link to the show and tickets. Now, let's get on with the pod.
It may be primal, it may be vital, but it makes you homicidal. It's a vicious, it's a vicious, it's a vicious cycle.
Hey guys, this week we're doing an episode on trans folks with periods. And to do that, we are bringing you interviews with two friends of ours, Nic Sommerfeld and Lucas Waldron. You'll hear Lucas at the end of the episode, but first we start with Nic Sommerfeld, a Bay Area performer and writer. Enjoy.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to Vicious Cycle. I'm your co-host, Meg H.
And I'm Meg T, and sadly we don't have Kate in the studio today.
She died.
She's no longer with us.
She's no longer with us. That is a joke. It's a terrible joke.
It's the worst joke we've ever made.
But we have a friend of the podcast
We do.
here with us in my cement bunker, a.k.a. apartment. Our friend Nick.
Yay! Thanks so
Hey,
much for being
Nick.
here, Nick.
I don't know why I keep eating. We're recording right now. I'm just going to hold the celery stick for the rest of the time.
When we record episodes, we have delicious snacks we lay out, and then we just stare at them
But
while
don't
we give
worry,
the podcast.
they pick the crunchiest snacks
Yes.
possible.
I know, we really do.
Like celery,
And they're
we've
in
got some
bags
apples,
that make this noise.
some crackers.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we really don't think about
No, we're terrible.
appropriateness of podcast.
We're terrible at this.
We really are. Okay.
Well, Meg.
Meg.
This is nice. This is going to be easy.
I realized something.
Yes.
Yes,
this
Nick.
morning when I found out that sadly Kate wouldn't be here.
Yes.
Today's podcast is M&M.
Oh!
Now, why don't we have M&Ms? Well, we got a pretty exciting episode today.
We do. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
We invited Nick to come and talk to us because Nick is a representative of the greater community of bleeders.
Yeah. When we started this podcast, we recognized that women aren't the only people who bleed.
Yes.
And we wanted to make sure that this podcast wasn't just, a very gendered female central.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're so glad to have Nick on
Yay!
to discuss what it's like to be a bleeder who doesn't identify as a woman.
Yes.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of my favorite things, even from the first podcast, was that there was never this is the podcast about bleeding for women.
Right.
Yeah.
It was no, people who bleed.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that because it certainly didn't feel like, well, this isn't for you. Because a lot of, menstruation-centric things
totally.
are very much focused at cis women, which
Yeah.
makes sense. But yeah. So, yeah.
We'll get into it. So first off, I wanted to ask you about how you identify. I feel like I'm still learning about the differences between being trans and being non-binary, or the things that connect those two words together. So you identify as non-binary.
I do. Now, I consider non-binary to be under the greater trans umbrella.
Got it.
And it's a personal preference for most people whether they claim the word trans or not.
Mm-hmm.
They're very much trans men and trans women, but then
Sure.
there's sort of everything in between. And some of the people between claim the word trans, some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
I generally consider that in between to still be under the trans umbrella. Now, I consider myself non-binary, but I also consider myself trans-masculine.
Okay.
And so within that, I do claim the word trans as I wear my mighty
Mighty
trans t-shirt.
I
It's so
love
cute.
it.
Yeah. So I certainly claim the word and consider myself a part of that community, but in no way do I consider myself a trans man.
Right.
So that's the big difference in my mind.
Yeah.
And just, I guess, as a clarification, when I say transmasculine, I mean, like, I've undergone top surgery.
Right.
So, like, I've made efforts to appear more masculine without the end goal being a trans man.
Yeah.
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 So I would say that's the big distinction in my mind.
Yeah.
Because when I say non-binary, I truly mean, like, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Is really where I identify. I think the ideal for me is to live in that. I was talking to a friend about this earlier, and I said, I think, ideally I'd like to be pictured more as a, like, gender amorphous alien than, like,
Yeah.
a man or a woman.
Sure.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I've heard
Yeah.
it described that way.
Yeah.
I had a coworker who was reading this like cool science fiction book about this alternate universe where there were 3 genders, and this teacher was like, "Yeah, I kind of like that idea, like identifying as like that third gender that's like not the binary. It's like an other thing."
Well, and it exists in other cultures, just not Western culture. Like, there is Two-Spirit, which is that, but the Native American version. And I think in parts of Asia there was recognized a third gender, but the
so cool.
Westernization kind of stigmatized it. So it's not a concept that's totally foreign to the human race, just foreign to the, like, Western consciousness.
I think that's a good point that you make, though. Like, trans people should be able to express, like, all forms of themselves just like any cis person. Because, like, as a cis woman, I grew up in a household that accepted, like, women who play sports. Like, my dad was a women's high school basketball coach. My mom's whole job is centered around sports. So, like, we grew up in a household where we were allowed to, like, wear dresses and play basketball and, like, do all the things and, like, experience like a whole spectrum of like what it meant to be a cis woman. So I think that's like important to remind people, like, it's a spectrum for everyone.
And I mean, I think that's a key point of conversation right now in the trans community is not limiting yourself. I know a trans girl who just cut all her hair off and has really embraced being like a butch punk rocker.
That's cool.
And I think, and I'm so proud of her for feeling comfortable doing that. Not feeling like she has to have the long hair and be like so feminine presenting to be the badass woman she is.
Yeah.
Right.
So, it's something that as all of this hopefully becomes more and more just like known about and socially acceptable and in the social consciousness, hopefully the strong presentations that people feel they need to make will diminish a bit, and we'll all be able to just kind of live in a fluid, fabulous state.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
That sounds great.
Vicious, 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 vicious cycle.
Let's dive into periods.
All right.
Nick, do you still get a period?
Tragically.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's unfortunately it's probably the most dysphoric thing I still deal with.
Yeah.
And I hope it doesn't go on much longer, but there's not exactly a rhyme or a reason to like, and exactly in 2.5 months of using, testosterone or like whatever.
Oh, 'cause you're on T.
So I am on T.
Got it.
But I'm on a super low dose because
Got
I'm
it.
not trying to have rapid changes.
Yeah.
Right.
And so with that, there's not a like, well, it's definitely going away at this
Yeah.
point. Eventually it probably will,
Got it.
but there's not a like set.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
like
no
calendar you
Yeah,
get to
exactly.
follow.
There's no
Right.
calendar, and especially because so with testosterone, there are different doses, and there's like you can take a high level, you can take a low level, but it's also like how your body processes it. So there's like when you change doses, you take it for a while, and then they like test your blood and see how much testosterone's in your system. So it's sort of a whole thing.
Yeah. Wow.
So they see where you're already at with your the
Basically,
T that's in
yeah.
your body naturally.
Exactly.
I didn't
That's so
know that.
interesting.
Yeah.
So they can like measure your testosterone level
Right.
kind of as you go on different levels of the medication. And I never wanted to like jump into a high dose because once again, my end goal was never being like, and now I'm a
Trans
dude.
guy.
Right. Yeah.
it was always like, I want some of these changes, but I'm also not looking for like 1, 2.
Yeah.
Now I'm to the other extreme. Like, so I've been on a really low dose for a little while, and I definitely have less, but they haven't completely gone away.
Okay.
And it's a bummer.
Yeah.
And I would say one of the hardest things about it is that I don't often feel I can talk about it. Like, you know, it's one of those things where it's in the comfort of like a close friendship, I feel like I can be like, this is happening and it sucks.
Yeah.
But I can't go to like any woman and be like, oh man, this is happening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
shitty, right? Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I can gender you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
And so it's like this
Yeah.
weird thing of like, I feel like I have to hide it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't conform to my gender expression, which
Sure.
is like a weird, dysphoric, fun thing to deal with.
Right.
So it's, yeah. I do still have it. I wish I didn't. And I hope that at some point I don't anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, I mean, comfortable enough with it, obviously, to talk about you two, to talk with
Yeah.
it to you two.
Yeah.
But,
And our listenership.
our listenership.
Listenership.
But it's, yeah, it's not like, I don't know that it's an exciting thing for a lot of people, but it's definitely like, not only like, it's the bummer of like, oh, this is happening. And also like, I don't feel like I can talk to anyone
Right,
about it.
yeah.
So it's kind of like double bummer.
Yeah, totally. There's that
Totally.
added layer there.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you don't want it because it doesn't fit with your gender expression, but also like if we lived in a society where it was more acknowledged that like bleeding is not like a specifically female thing to go through, like, or is it just that you're like, I just don't want to freaking have it anymore?
You know, to be fair, I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible that it wouldn't bother me as much
Yeah.
if it wasn't considered so feminine.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
if it wasn't labeled as like, this is the thing cis women do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it didn't come with that, maybe it wouldn't bother me as much. But also like, in general, like I'd rather it went away.
I think a lot of cis
love
women
it.
can connect with
Right,
on that.
exactly. I'm not like, this is the best. I'd keep it
Yay.
around if it wasn't just so gendering.
I know because we just did all these episodes about tampons and
Yeah.
like just like always keeping in mind that like the podcast isn't just for like cis women but the fact that we're talking about what is typically known as feminine hygiene products, I'm like, we have to think of a new word to talk about them.
I didn't think about
You
that.
know, they're like
Good call, Meg.
menstrual products.
Menstrual products.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
That's
Good
just,
call.
and it makes more sense.
Yeah, it honestly does. Like feminine
Yeah.
hygiene products always seemed weird to
Deodorant.
me
Yes. What
does
because
that
it
even
was
mean?
like
Right.
soap,
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
shampoo, like so many things could fall into this.
A
but it's like,
loofah.
You're like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
well, I remember like younger being like, where are the like, you know, in the store, like, oh, they're in the feminine hygiene products, and being like, what?
What is that?
Yeah.
Like because it keeps you
Encompass, yeah.
clean, but it just absorbs.
Yeah.
How does it?
It just takes care of your
hydrate-
blood. It should be with Band-Aids.
Right. Like, I mean, if anything,
Seriously.
it's like, yeah, I just need a Band-Aid for the bleeding that's happening.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that seems right.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Right next to the Band-Aid.
Perfect. Perfect. Man.
Actually, this is a good segue. Do you feel like there are certain types of products that benefit non-binary folks that are like maybe not as gendered or just more comfortable? I don't know.
I will admit, this isn't a topic of conversation that frequents
You
the
don't say.
the trans community.
Like when you're at your communal table all
yeah,
together.
when
When you're at your lunch table?
when me and my non-binary peeps hang out at the lunch table talking about all the queer shit, we're always like, so menstrual products, right?
I knew it
No,
was like that.
not so much. No, and I think, you know, I do think it is a thing that's probably a little different for everyone.
Yeah.
For me personally, I've stopped using tampons because that feels I don't know, weirder somehow at this point. So my favorite thing at this point, I mean, like, you know, in a pinch, I'll use a normal pad, but my favorite thing at this point is the underwear that just has it like built in.
Thinks.
Because it's just putting on underwear.
Right.
It doesn't feel like I'm doing this other thing.
Yeah.
Because this is happening, it just feels like, oh, this time I get out this pair of underwear.
Yeah.
And wear these instead.
Right.
Continue with my day.
So yeah, I use Thinks and I use Paddocks, which is another brand.
Oh, cool.
And so I have a set, like I have two Thinks and 3 Paddocks. And so like those usually get me through. And if I, you know, I usually have like a panty liners around if I need them, but that usually sort of gets me through, and I don't have that feeling of like I'm wearing something or I've like put something in, like it's just like now I'm wearing underwear.
Yeah.
Right.
It's different underwear. It's maybe not my most comfortable underwear, but it's just a different pair of underwear.
Yeah.
And that's what I've found to be the most comfortable.
Yeah.
So
Nice. Yeah, I've heard trans folks being kind of frustrated about like the super pink and purple like packaging that a lot of stuff comes in.
Yeah.
I just recently bought some organic tampons from Target, and I kind of appreciated that they have like palm fronds on the outside. I'm like, okay, that's not like that's not a gendered like pattern, I would say.
And I find that much more calming.
I agree.
You know? Like, oh, it's like
I know they're super cute.
on the
We
beach.
can see them. We can see them from here in my bathroom. They're super cute. They go with my motif.
stylish bathroom motif.
You know, really the important part when you're picking out tampons. So.
I agree.
To match the bunker motif.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Also, like those pinks and purples, that feels like it's so geared toward like 13-year-old girls.
Yes.
It feels weird to be an adult woman. Like, I'll get this polka dot pink packaging.
That is one thing that I always found kind of weird. Like, it didn't bother me as a preteen, but like when I was in like my early 20s, I remember being like, do you still buy the same ones when you're an adult?
Yeah.
Like,
Is there
because
an
it
adult
feels
version?
weird to like, but really, it's just the same ones.
Yeah. It's
with
like
the
when you
like
have...
cheesy package. Okay,
Yeah,
I know.
It's like when you have a relative who like keeps talking to you like you're a child, but you're like 30.
Yeah,
They're just
you're
like,
like I'm actually
How's
an adult.
Meg T doing? You're looking good. I'm like, okay. We don't have to talk like that right now.
I think Meg's
And then
going to
you
have her
open-
read my labias later.
Listen, Uncle Dave. No, I'm just kidding.
One question we had was like, how do you feel like the non-binary experience is unique in terms of menstruation? And also, what do you wish that cis people knew about the experience that we don't know?
I mean, I would say probably the biggest thing that maybe cis people don't realize, or that would be helpful to know, is that I think there's an assumption of like, well, you start, you know, especially for anyone who starts testosterone, it's like, well, you start testosterone and then it goes away. And it's like, well, that's not really how that works.
Yeah.
And some people have it for like years after starting testosterone, and it all depends on your body and your hormone levels. And also, you know, there are people who get hysterectomies, and there are people who don't, and there are people who keep that, and there are people who will be on testosterone for a while and then go off. Like, I know people who in the community who have been on testosterone for a while went off and then had to go through sort of their own, like, kind of go through an experience of whether they wanted their period again, or like when it came back, how they felt about it. Wrapping it all up. The big thing, I think, is just that like hormone therapy isn't something that everyone does, and it isn't a quick fix, and not everyone gets hysterectomies. Like, these are all, it depends on the person. It depends on their body and what it can handle. There's not one way of being trans, and there's not a like formulaic process. So I think that would be the thing that I would say, like, don't assume that someone is bleeding, don't assume someone isn't bleeding. Like, there's so much else happening there.
Yeah.
Do you feel like like being able to talk to other trans people about this is something that you wish you could do more of? Do you feel like it's a taboo in the community that like needs to be kind of dealt with, or do you think it's more like just about building trust with anyone, no matter who it is, to be able to talk about?
I mean, I would say that it's more of a societal thing than it is like specifically in the trans community, because I think if periods were more talked about in general, they would be more talked about in the trans community as well.
It's more just the same taboo that we all deal
Yeah,
with.
I think it's the same.
Got it.
Yeah, the same taboo that everyone deals with. Of like, here's this thing that happens all the time, and for some reason we're not talking about it.
Yeah.
And why is that? And it's weird. So I would say that's the main stigma, if anything.
Yeah.
This is kind of changing gears, but I meant to ask it earlier on. But I'm curious, like, what your periods were like before T. Like, were they kind of your run-of-the-mill period?
Right.
Not at all.
Oh.
I had very strange periods.
You and Meg T both.
Hey.
Meg T is a strange period haver.
I am.
So okay, well I'm gonna take it back a little.
Oh, good. Let's go back. Way
Go
back.
back with me
To baby Nick.
Baby Nick. So kind of similar to, I think, what Kate talked about on earlier episodes. I started birth control really young, partly because I had crazy irregular periods, and partly because acne. And so I actually was on birth control I know a lot of people who were on it for a while and were off it for a while. No, age 15 until next week. I have been on birth control my entire adult life.
Wow.
I'm getting my implant removed on next Thursday.
Wow.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
It's really it's really strange. It's so funny because I was leaning toward getting it out, and then I started listening to the podcast, and I was sort of yeah, it is weird that I've been on it my entire adult life. I don't know what it's like to not I don't know if I have hormonal emotional side effects or anything like that, because I've literally been on it since I was 15.
It's your normal
Right.
thing. Yeah.
So I'm curious to see what that's like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have always had super irregular periods. A few days here, longer here, then not for a while, whenever they really felt like it. It was very inconsistent. I will say, I did find out part of the reason that was the case.
Oh.
Meg and I just turned to each other and made the same exact face. Oh, do tell.
All right, guys. I'm going to blow your minds.
Uh-oh.
Oh, God, I'm
Oh, God.
excited.
My beer is empty. What am I going to do?
Wait, do you want to get another beer first?
I mean.
I could get us all. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Time out.
Okay, great.
This
Oh, my
is
God.
Vicious Cycle break
Time.
because
Vicious Cycle.
Hi everyone, it's Kate popping in. I'm not dead. Just popping in to say that you'll have to wait till the next episode to hear the absolute bombshell that Nick dropped about why their periods are so weird. Again, that's going to be next week's episode. It's so crazy. I'm so excited for you guys to hear about it. But next, we want to bring you our second interview of this episode. It's with Lucas Waldron, who is trans. He's a journalist in New York City, and we know him from USF and from various comedy gigs. So here's some highlights from that interview, which was conducted by myself and Meg Trowbridge, because this time Meg Hayes had died. And by the way, the sound quality on this, you guys, is not great, which is totally my bad. Lucas does not live in an underwater bubble. I just don't know how to work Skype. Lucas, we're so excited to have you here on Vicious Cycle. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for being here. You're the best.
No problem. If only I was physically there.
I want to talk about your period.
Let's
Yeah.
get into it.
Let's get into it.
Let's get in there.
So,
Not literally.
Let's not go in, but let's go around.
let's go about it. Was there a time when you decided that you wanted to go by Lucas?
Was there a time when the periods became more of an issue with your gender identity? Or?
Yeah, no, I mean, once I started transitioning, it became a much bigger problem because, well, I just started to feel more and more like I didn't want this thing happening. Like, I didn't identify with, you know, female bodiedness, and I certainly had no intention of ever, you know, having children. And so it just felt like it's very unnecessary and annoying. There's just like so much to navigate when you're transitioning and you're dealing with bathrooms. Like, you know, I would just use tampons. There were no Diva cups at this time. Maybe there were. I didn't have them. And so you just have to deal with like changing your tampon in the men's bathroom if you're going to use the men's bathroom. And men's bathrooms like don't have trash cans in them a lot of times, which I still find to be very strange. So then you're like, oh, great, I have to, like, deal with this tampon.
Yeah.
I mean, historically, men just don't generate garbage.
Yeah, men have no garbage.
They don't generate garbage
Right.
at all. They just are garbage.
You said it.
Preach.
You said it. So in 2012, you went on testosterone.
I did.
Talk about what that does to someone's period.
In theory, taking testosterone at a high enough dose means you will stop having a period altogether. Most trans guys would find that their periods go away. Mine never would fully go away. It would sort of fluctuate and arrive spontaneously.
Like spontaneously, like not like some months yes, some months no.
Yeah, like 3 months of nothing, and then suddenly I'd have like periods for
Wow.
like, you know, never for a full like really long cycle, but like for like 3 or 4 days. For the 4.5 to 5 years that I was on T before I had a hysterectomy, I would still have periods like pretty often, unfortunately. You know, one of the other things I'll just throw out there, not that you asked, but like this isn't a problem for me because I, you know, am in a relationship with like a cisgendered woman, but a lot of trans guys have like romantic relationships with cisgendered men, and so then you have like even more issues with periods. Like if you're still getting your period, you have obviously a risk of pregnancy, which opens up all these other really big problems for trans guys. A lot of trans guys that I have talked to have had to think about, you know, their periods in the context of actually getting pregnant
and then
and
like
planning around.
yeah, like all the ways you have to prevent that. So much of it is hormonal, which I assume must mess with taking tea and
Yeah, so I think there's like, once you expand this conversation beyond just like the physical act of bleeding, then you have to deal with like all of the obvious stigmas and weird shit that will come up if you're like a trans guy trying to access birth control or, you know, like figure out a way to not get pregnant if you're having sex with a cisgender man. One great way to deal with that would be a hysterectomy, but that's very, very inaccessible to most.
So let's talk about the hysterectomy.
I decided, I think, from shortly after I had top surgery, I knew that I wanted to have a hysterectomy, but it wasn't a priority because I didn't have health insurance that was going to really cover it. So but then when I was in grad school, luckily the UC system just has great trans coverage. So
That's awesome.
so I was like, ooh, this is my opportunity to have a hysterectomy and actually have insurance cover it. So
wow, that's amazing.
Good job, University of California.
Yeah.
yeah, thanks.
That-
The hysterectomy surgery, I don't, just as a PSA, because I didn't know this until I had a hysterectomy, is fucking crazy now because science has expanded. Basically, you get these 2 little incisions that are made on the side of kind of what I would imagine to be sort of like above your ovary on each side. And then the surgeon goes through your like belly button. Like they have a hole in the belly button, like these little robotic arms through, and they use these little tiny, like, yeah, they're arms. They're like little robotic arms. And they wrap up your organs in a plastic bag, and then they pull them to the top of like your belly button incision, and they take these little, I don't know what the tool is called, these blades, and chop it up into really fine pieces so that it could actually be pulled out of the tiny incision hole, and then they just pull it out within the plastic bag.
They
And
are
that's what
just
happens.
chopping up the uterus inside your body and then
Inside of a plastic bag, inside of your body.
Meg's face right now is just like frozen in, I don't know what.
my eyebrows will never go down again. Also,
Dude.
I keep picturing, like, I'm sure they're less robotic than I think, but I'm imagining, like, Westworld tiny arms, but they're, like, fully formed like hands, you know?
Honestly, they're probably not that far off. My operation actually did not go through my belly button. The surgeon told me that had I had children, my uterus would be too large to come out through the vaginal canal, and it would have had to be a situation where they cut open by your belly button, and they have to use these robot arms to like cut it into little pieces and pull it out through this incision by your belly button in a bag in pieces.
Okay, so how is a uterus not big enough to come out of the vaginal canal, but a baby is? Like, how?
Well, can't. I think it's because you're not dilated.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for answering the question. I was like, I don't think they've thought this through.
And apparently it's hard, also, especially when you're older. Your uteruses are hardened with age. Is what my surgeon told me. And especially if you've used your uterus a lot, it gets harder, and that's part of the reason why they have to cut it up. They can't like squish it out.
Well, Lucas Waldron, thank you so much for being on Vicious Cycle.
You're a mensch.
You're a mensch, and we really appreciate hearing, from someone who's experienced periods who no longer gets them.
Yeah, no problem. I hope that in your quest to fully understand the period, I've helped bring you just one small step closer.
Your description of hysterectomies will lose me some hours of sleep.
So now I'm back in the studio with the Megs to, what do you guys think about all that?
Wow. Just to clarify, Lucas did have his uterus exit through
The vaginal canal.
the vaginal canal.
Yes, but
his mom,
who also had a hysterectomy, they chopped it up and pulled it out. And actually, another thing that Lucas mentioned, which is so interesting, is that he still has ovaries. Most people, when they get hysterectomies, they keep their ovaries because ovaries generate your hormones, and it's like super necessary. And he said, and the doctors warned him or told him, like, usually you don't get your ovaries removed, and if you do, then you have to kind of have hormone therapy for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And so Lucas still has his ovaries, and so I still wondered if he still ovulates. And I looked it up, and you do. When you still have your ovaries but not a uterus, you do still ovulate. So that's just interesting. It just doesn't go anywhere.
Super interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, but the body.
So he still has a cycle.
Technically, yeah, but with testosterone, maybe eventually that'll be shut down. Too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. That's all mind-blowing.
It is.
My eyebrows are still up.
Still up.
Oh, and we came up with a new round of rapid-fire questions we decided we wanted to ask our guests. So here are those questions.
I hope you don't mind if you could personify your period of yesteryear. If your period could drink, what would it drink?
Blood.
Oh, nice.
Did you say blood?
Yeah.
That is the punkest,
That's-
most vicious thing I've ever heard in my life. Can you give your period of yesteryear an animal personification? What's it called in
Spirit
Harry Potter?
animal?
Oh, spirit animal. What?
Oh, an anima?
No, it's a P word.
Patronus.
Patronus. Yes.
Patronus.
If your
Patronus.
period had a patronus, what would it have been?
Oh wow, really good question.
Hard-hitting stuff.
Probably like a large lobster, like the kind you might get off of a boat near like the coast of Maine.
So specific. That's great.
Was your period Republican or Democrat?
Wow. Well, I do resent the two-party
Fair.
option. So I would
In
say
gender
probably,
and politics.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say probably Communist Party
Nice.
for obvious reasons.
So
Right,
yeah,
party.
speaking of communists, we did an episode, don't know if you've heard it yet, where we looked at periods, what they're called in other cultures and other languages. And in Denmark, a period, when you get your period, people in Denmark say the communists are in the gazebo. That's what they
That's their
say.
Aunt Flo.
It's
Wow.
very, very
That's such an
Danish.
accurate such an accurate description.
And here's how Nick answered those questions.
If your period could drink, what would it drink?
I feel like something high alcohol content.
Okay.
Like something stiff, like
And
maybe
like
like
a double IPA or something.
Oh, well, no, because
Oh,
my
wait, because your
my
period's
period's
probably
gluten free
gluten-free.
because
Yes.
I'm gluten free.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hashtag celiac disease. So I was thinking maybe something like scotch or
Okay.
whiskey. I think
Lovely.
I think maybe scotch. I think my
it.
period would drink scotch.
I
That's
like
great.
that.
Like on the rocks.
You have a classy period.
Yeah.
It's like
Scotch
not
on the
messing
rocks.
around
Yeah.
with any of like the
It's
sugary
seen some
nonsense.
shit.
It's seen some shit.
you know?
It's seen some real
Yeah. It
fucking
It just needs
shit.
to unwind in a leather chair with some scotch.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Come on.
Yeah.
I
that's,
like that.
That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
If your period had a patroness, what would it be? A patronus?
Patronus.
The whole reason patronus. I don't.
Patronus.
I think I thought of it so
if my
often.
period had a patronus.
I will re-ask the question, Nick. If your period had a patronus, what would it be?
The first thing that comes to mind, because I feel like it somehow embodies all of the nonsense that has come with my period, is a porcupine.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I think it's a porcupine.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good answer.
What political party does your period affiliate with?
I feel like it's pretty. I'm tempted. I think it's kind of neutral. I think it's sort of undecided. It doesn't really know what it's doing, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So
It's a swing
I think
vote?
it's a swing vote.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I love that.
Good to know.
I think my period is apolitical right now. It's like I don't want to have anything to do with anything. I'm not. I mean, obviously, I feel like we have to do a disclaimer. The opinions of our periods are not connected to
Right. Do not at all represent
Our
our personal
opinions.
political beliefs.
Vicious, 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 vicious cycle.
Big thanks to Lucas and Nick for both opening up about their periods with us. We're so glad you guys were on our podcast.
Hey guys, before we end the episode, I have a surprise song for you.
What? What? No, you don't. Oh my God.
Here we
She
go.
does.
It's about what? What is it about?
Smells.
Oh, because
Oh.
last episode was
right.
about smells.
Sour muscat food and dewy grass goodness. Condom smell. Semen sweet, sinful impureness.
Oh my God.
Antique rag laying in the dust for too long. These are the words to my period smell song. Bum, 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 fistful of pennies and bronze that is rotting. Street mahogany metal that's twisting. Warm dirt that's been in the sun for too long. Join me while I sing my period song. Classic fish sauces and sweet seaweed pennies. Sour blood, swamp soil, and a tad bit earthy. Coin purses left in the shower for too long. We're really singing this period smell song when I'm bashful and embarrassed. When I'm on the rag, I simply remember my period smell song, and then I don't feel so bad.
You guys, thank you so much for tuning into Vicious Cycle. And remember, this is not the last you are hearing of Nic Sommerfeld, because as promised, next episode, we are bringing you the crazy story
God.
that they told us.
So floored.
It's crazy, and we'll get into it next week. Your mind is going to be blown. In the meantime, like us on all the social media and keep calm.
And
Tampon.
It may be primal, it may be vital, but it makes you homicidal. It's a vicious, it's a vicious, it's a vicious cycle.
Our theme song was performed by The Go Ahead. Check out more at thegoaheadmusic.com.